Hi everybody, this week I'm introducing Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid starring Steve Martin in tribute to its director and co-writer Carl Reiner, who died last week at the age of 98. Reiner was one of the true legends of American comedy and show business. His career started on Broadway in the late 1940s, but really took off in television in the 50s when he acted and wrote sketches for Sid Caesar's variety show. Later, he created The Dick Van Dyke Show, one of the most influential sitcoms of all time, and then he started directing movies in the late 60s. To a younger generation, he may now be best remembered for playing Saul Bloom in Steven Soderbergh's Ocean 11's film. And personally, I have loved his latter-day position as Hollywood's oldest Twitter user, especially when he was being rude about Donald Trump. My first encounters with Carl Reiner were the films he made with Steve Martin, like The Jerk and The Man with Two Brains. We ummed and ahed about whether to pick either of those as our tribute, but decided that for an audience of film enthusiasts like you all, Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid was the obvious choice. As well as being a very funny film, its central conceit of having Steve Martin act alongside some of the greats from the classic Hollywood era is just very, very enjoyable to watch. The Jerk, which came out in 1979, made Steve Martin a movie star. It grossed $100 million on a $4 million budget. And in a tribute last week, Steve Martin tweeted, "Goodbye to my greatest mentor in the movies and in life. Thank you, dear Carl." Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid was their follow-up that he made with Reiner, and it was released in 1982. Martin plays a film noir-style private eye who interacts with Humphrey Bogart's Philip Marlowe and has encounters with the likes of Lana Turner, Ava Gardner, Burt Lancaster, Fred McMurray, and so on. In total, there are clips from 19 classic Hollywood movies in this film, and if you're familiar with any of them, you'll delight when you hear names like Walter Neff, Kitty Collins, and Swede Anderson first crop up. I've listed all the actors and which old films the clips come from on our website. And having just watched Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid for the first time in ages yesterday, the old movie that's now in it that I'm now most keen to see is one called The Bribe with Ava Gardner, Charles Lawton, and Vincent Price, which I hadn't really heard of before, and I suspect is relatively obscure for good reason. The idea for Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid came from Martin, who told Reiner and their eventual co-writer George Gipe a story idea where he wanted to use a clip from an old movie as part of the plot. That then steamrolled into the trio thinking, how could they fashion dozens of clips into a story? It helps that, like in many film noirs, the plot's not the most important thing here. Reiner and Gipe spent hours watching old movies for specific shots and, in their words, listening for a line that was ambiguous enough but had enough meat in it to actually contribute a line. I think it works brilliantly, and a lot of that is down to Steve Martin, who, while delivering some laugh-out-loud lines and brilliant sight gags, plays it pretty straight. It's definitely not like they're taking the piss out of these old films. Martin said he didn't watch old noirs in preparation because I didn't want to act like Humphrey Bogart. I didn't want to be influenced. The authentic look and feel of the film is also thanks to Carl Reiner's collaborators. The film's production designer, John DeCoeur, started work at Universal in the 1940s, so obviously was very familiar with the type of film being lovingly recreated here. The score was composed by Miklos Rosa, who'd written the original music for Double Indemnity, The Lost Weekend, and The Killers, all films with clips in Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. And the costume design is by another absolute legend, Edith Head, who created over 20 suits for Steve Martin in a similar fashion to those that she'd made in the past for Cary Grant and James Stewart. And there's a lovely tribute in the end credits that reads, "Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid was Edith Head's final film. To her and to all the brilliant, technical and creative people who worked on the films of the 1940s and 1950s, this motion picture is affectionately dedicated." One other key person of the production team who wasn't a Hollywood veteran is the cinematographer Michael Chapman. He had form in shooting black and white. He'd made Raging Bull a few years before with Martin Scorsese. But for this, he also had to do months of research to work out how to match his footage with all of the old clips in the film. In addition to Steve Martin and the scores of famous old faces, the other key cast member is Rachel Ward as the femme fatale Juliet Forrest. And I'd forgotten until I looked at her IMDb profile that she's also in another really great neo-noir that I'd recommend, After Dark, My Sweet, based on the Jim Thompson novel. So if you've not seen that, I'd recommend seeking that out. She's also in quite a funny lockdown video with Sam Neill and her husband Brian Brown that I'll link to from our website too. One last note on Carl Reiner. You do get to see him in the film as well. He plays the butler, clearly modelled on Erich von Stroheim's character in Sunset Boulevard. So there have been plenty of great tributes paid to Carl Reiner in the last week. I hope you enjoyed this one of ours. I'm sure you will. So stay safe, everybody. Viddy well.